The Oakmere Forest to the west of Greyhaven was rarely visited. Its trees grew thick, and the wind whistled through them in mournful pulses, like a ghostly lullaby. The first snow of the season blanketed old paths, erasing any footprints within minutes. William Redford, a man who lived alone on the mountain's slope, was last seen at dusk. He wore clothes too thin for the cold, slippers worn to the sole, and eyes wide open as if he hadn't blinked. "William, it's me." A voice drifted through the wet trees, soft and lilting like a lullaby. No one else heard it. Only William, his face relaxed. A faint smile pulled at the corners of his mouth. It was his wife's voice, Clarissa, who had died of tuberculosis 3 years ago. He stepped deeper into the forest. No bag, no lantern. His eyes were fixed on a void between tangled roots. "Wait for me," another whisper, closer this time, lower. And then, as if under a trance, William vanished between the overlapping shadows of trees, forming the shape of a gateway. It wasn't until the next morning that people discovered the footprints leading into the woods, but there were no prints returning. The Sparrow's Rest Inn sat on the edge of the Greyhaven woods, worn and sunken between two stretches of barren land. Mrs. Mildred rarely welcomed strangers after sundown, especially in winter when the wind from Oakmere carried with it a sound like flutes wailing through broken window latches. But on the fourth night after William Redford's disappearance, a rapid knocking came, sharp, insistent, as if the person outside was trying to break the barrier between sleep and wakefulness. When Mrs. Mildred opened the door, her oil lamp nearly slipped from her hand. The man standing there was nearly frozen. Snow clung to his beard and hair, his lips purple. But what made her shudder wasn't his ruined appearance. It was the hollow look in his eyes, as if he had returned from a place without light. "Room," he rasped. I need a room. Clarissa told me to come back here." Clarissa. The name made Mrs. Mildred's heart clench. Clarissa was dead. 3 years now. Everyone in town knew, but she didn't ask. She simply led the man inside, brewed hot ginger tea, and fetched a thick blanket. The next morning, when Dr. Lucien Crowe arrived, he found a scene he would never forget. William Redford sitting still by the fireplace, the flames casting light across a face pale as wax. In his hand, he clutched a piece of old embroidered cloth, its lace faded, a corner stained with dark brown blood. Lucien sat beside him, saying nothing at first. He knew when someone begins to speak of the impossible, silence often draws more truth than questions. "I heard her," William said, unblinking. "She was singing, in the woods. It was Clarissa's song. Come away to the woodlands. Every note, every beat, I couldn't forget it." Lucien noticed William's hands were cracked, as if he had walked through ice without gloves. His arms bore horizontal scratches, long, drawn out, as if clawed or scraped by thick roots. "Clarissa told me to come back, told me to wait at the inn. She said she's not dead, just lost, and something's holding her down below." "Below?" Lucien frowned. "Beneath the roots," William whispered. "She said not to trust the light. It's false. You have to listen to the sound. Deep." Lucien felt a chill crawl up his spine, not just from the words, but from a strange scent now drifting in the air. An old lavender perfume nearly forgotten by the world. It was exactly the kind Clarissa once wore, according to those who remembered her. Stranger still, in Clarissa's death record, it stated she had been buried in Hillcrest Cemetery 3 years ago. But when Lucien reviewed the file again, the final line had been crossed out, and beneath the ink, signs of inner ear instability, middle ear bone structure fractured, cause unknown. A woman who died of tuberculosis. Why would her middle ear be damaged? Lucien felt the blood in his body begin to cool. 3 days after William Redford's return, 2 more people disappeared. The first was a 16-year-old boy who had gone into the woods to collect firewood. His mother claimed she heard him scream her name at 2 a.m. right outside the window. She flung the door open and ran out, but there was no one. Only a trail of footprints in the snow leading toward Oakmere. No prints came back. The second was old Frederick, once a watchmaker. He lived alone in a wooden cottage not far from the forest. At midnight, neighbors heard his clock chime endlessly. When they came to check, the door was wide open, the clock was shattered, and a music box unwound by no one was playing the same eerie melody on repeat. People began to whisper. The forest was calling their names, not in their heads, but in the air itself, as if the wind spoke in the voices of those they had once loved. When the fourth disappearance happened, a 7-year-old boy, the town could no longer deny it. The boy had been born mute, but his mother swore that on the night he vanished, she heard his voice call Mama from the woods. The Greyhaven Council made a decision. They wrote a letter by hand and sent it to Brackley Road, calling upon the only person they knew who had once handled matters that defied explanation, Dorian Vale. Across town, Dorian was studying documents on biological resonance frequencies when the letter arrived. In the dim light of the morning, Lucien skimmed it, his brow furrowed. Dorian, they say some people are hearing the voices of their dead relatives and disappearing. Some even show signs of suicide. Mass hysteria? Dorian replied, not looking up. There's blood at the windows, broken items. And the strange part, all the victims heard a voice in the woods and disappeared only after responding to it. Dorian finally looked up, a glint of curiosity and caution in his eyes. A voice that replies, not just echo, but intelligence. Then it's no longer superstition. Lucien nodded. And one more thing. The temporary forensic doctor said Frederick's body was found. Only his skull remained, but both eardrums had ruptured, as if something screamed directly into his head. There was no more hesitation. That same afternoon, the two set off for Greyhaven, carrying with them recording devices, frequency sensors, and something more important, the memory of cases that science couldn't explain, yet always left a trace. Less than half a day after arriving in Greyhaven, Dorian Vale stood alone in the heart of Oakmere Forest. The sky was overcast, and thick fog coiled around the frozen tree trunks. Beneath a thin layer of snow, the ground was rock-hard like steel, but Dorian wasn't here for the scenery. He was listening, not with his ears, but with a wooden cylindrical device fitted with a thin brass membrane, something akin to an old georesonance listener once used by miners to detect underground vibrations. Lucien stood a few steps away, hands in his coat pockets, eyeing his friend with both suspicion and can't perceive frequencies that low, but the body, especially the nervous system and the vestibular organs, still respond. He stood upright, eyes gleaming as if he had just found a bloodstain in a murder scene. There was a study in France, 1962. They found that infrasound around 18 to 19 hertz could cause hallucinations, unease, even sightings of shadowy figures. Something as simple as a moving curtain could convince someone they were being watched. You're saying The voices they're hearing could be caused by this? Caused or recalled, Dorian replied. Low frequencies stimulate the temporal lobe and hippocampus, areas of the brain that process auditory memory. If someone has heard a loved one's voice countless times, similar vibrations can trigger that memory, but not in order. Like their memories start singing to them, or like a broken phonograph, replaying the same phrase, warped more and more each time. Lucien shuddered. Just then, a brittle snapping sound echoed from the right, like a heavy step crushing a dry branch. Both men turned sharply, but no one was there. Dorian moved toward the sound, his gaze sharp and cold as a scalpel. At the base of a large ash tree, they found a small fissure in the earth. Beneath it, half buried in frost and soil, was a rusted metal plate, not large, but surrounded by twisted roots, as if the forest itself had tried to conceal it. He knelt down and tapped on the metal. The sound it returned wasn't natural, a low, muffled tone like a strangled bell. Dorian stepped back, eyes fixed on the ground. Lucien, if that frequency didn't come from nature, then under these roots, something is broadcasting it. Lucien swallowed hard. You're saying someone is playing voices of the dead? Dorian didn't smile. We don't know that yet, but one thing's certain. Someone is calling people toward them. On their second night in Greyhaven, the snow thickened. Wind howled through the chimneys like a long, drawn-out moan, making the old brick houses tremble as if holding their breath. Lucien Crowe rarely dreamed, at least not of the past. But that night he found himself lying in the wooden bed of his childhood home. In the dream, everything was eerily vivid. The flickering glow of the oil lamp, the rocking chair in the corner, the smell of old pine wood and his mother's voice singing, "Close your eyes, love. Don't be afraid, the forest hums where dreams are made." Her voice was gentle as breath, echoing near his ear. Lucien couldn't remember the last time he heard that lullaby. His mother had died of a stroke when he was 10, a quiet, bone-chilling autumn afternoon. And from then on, the melody had never returned. Until now, he wanted to respond, to say something, anything. But his mouth wouldn't open, his limbs wouldn't move. Something held him down. This wasn't a normal dream. It had depth. Suddenly, the room dimmed. His mother's face was still near his, but her voice warped into a rasp, distorted and choked. "Lucien, come down." The lullaby stopped. In its place, a knocking sound began, dull, rhythmic, thump, 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 coming from beneath the floorboards. Lucien jolted upright. He was in his room at the Sparrow's Rest. The candle had burned out. The night was pitch black. His breath came in gasps, heart pounding, but in the silence, he could still hear it. The lullaby was continuing, not inside his head, from beneath the floor. He lit the lamp. No one in the room, no one in the hallway. But when he leaned to splash cold water on his face, he froze. Blood, a tiny smear near his left ear. No pain, but it was real. The next morning, he told Dorian what happened. As soon as Lucien finished, Dorian spun around, eyes sharp as ice. "You said that lullaby was your mother's voice?" Lucien nodded. "And you've never told anyone about it?" "Never." Dorian was silent for a moment, then flipped to a page in his notebook, showing the waveform of a 19 Hz sound, its pattern eerily close to the brain's REM sleep cycle. "Lucien, if what you heard was real, then the sound emitter isn't just causing hallucinations. It's accessing locked memory layers. You didn't remember your mother's voice. Something unlocked the drawer where it was hidden." Lucien shivered. "And if it can recreate the voice of someone dead?" Dorian said slowly. Then who's choosing which song to play? 2 days after arriving in Greyhaven, Dorian Vale and Lucien Crowe began testing a device Dorian had modified himself. A mechanical recorder combined with a low-frequency vibration sensor attached to a thin sheet of silver, sensitive enough to hear the silence cracking. They set the device up in 3 locations around the Oakmere forest, precisely where reports of voices heard had been recorded. Dorian drew a map in his notebook, a net of careful measurements accurate to the foot. "We're not just listening," he explained. "We need to know which direction it spreads. If it's artificial sound, there will be a point of origin and points of reflection, like tracking a fire from its smoke trail." Lucien set his pocket watch. "How long will the devices run?" Dorian, eyes still on the equipment, replied, "We wait until 3:33. Lucien frowned. "Isn't it usually 3 a.m. in rituals?" Dorian flipped a page and pointed at a graph of the first wave pattern. William disappeared at exactly 3:33. The lullaby you heard appeared on the audio log between 3:32 and 3:34. And last night, when you woke up, also 3:33. Lucien fell quiet. Coincidence had begun forming patterns. This was no longer superstition. It was a cycle. The air was getting colder. They sat inside a small guard post at the forest edge, beside a mini audio receiver connected to the main sensor array. As the time approached, the atmosphere grew heavier, not from wind or fog, but from a silence that was too perfect. 3:32. The silver membrane began to tremble. No audible sound yet, but a pulse of green and red lights flashed on the monitor, like a hospital heart rate line. 3:33. The signal surged, still beneath human hearing range, but strong enough to make Lucien's pencil roll off the table. Dorian expanded the waveform. A spiral pattern appeared. Its rhythm closely resembled what's known as the Schumann resonance, Earth's natural electromagnetic frequency. "Lucien," Dorian said in a low voice, "this frequency isn't just coming from the forest. It's resonating with the bedrock underneath. That means something powerful enough is sending waves that make the entire limestone foundation vibrate." Lucien blinked. "You mean like a giant speaker system under the ground?" Dorian nodded. "And someone is playing a different recording every night." At dawn, Dorian reviewed the recordings. The wave map revealed a clear anomaly. The sound didn't spread in a circular pattern like natural acoustics. It spiraled outward. He redrew the diagram. The epicenter was exactly where they had found the rusted metal plate, beneath the twisted roots. Lucien squinted at the map. "That spot, if I'm not mistaken." Dorian finished his sentence, his voice dry. "It used to be a secret meteorological station in 1848, shut down after an uncontrolled acoustic event." The 2 men looked at each other. A machine buried in the woods, a forest echoing voices of the dead. And now, someone had reactivated it, just as villagers began vanishing, one by one. The next afternoon, just as the sun dipped below the ridge, Dorian came to a sunken clearing, the site where the signal had been strongest. Light was fading. Mist cloaked the ground. The wind wailed between the trees like someone sighing in sorrow. Lucien scanned the area, the heavy cloak barely shielding him from the cold that slithered through every layer of fabric. They stood before a perfect ring of trees. No grass, no fallen leaves, just bare soil covered in twisted roots like the spine of a slumbering beast. These roots didn't grow at random. They extended from ancient trunks, converging at the center, like fingers clutching something buried deep below. Dorian knelt, took out a small dagger, and gently prodded the gap between 2 roots. A dry, hollow click echoed. "Metal," he said, eyes gleaming. "What we're looking for is right beneath this." Lucien knelt beside him, pointing at a large root. It bore faded carvings, not natural markings, symbols in spiral form, similar to those used in 17th century European necromantic rituals. Dorian didn't believe in magic, but he recorded them anyway, partly out of caution, and partly because whoever had activated the machine might believe in them, and belief was more dangerous than proof. After nearly an hour of digging and clearing roots, they uncovered a circular hatch made of a strange alloy, uncorroded, unmarred, despite being buried for decades. On its surface, a square hole, like a lock. Dorian pulled out an odd key, not his own, but a metal rod found in Frederick's remains days earlier. The man whose eardrums had exploded. The key fit perfectly. Click, the hatch turned slowly, releasing a hiss like the earth exhaling after centuries of silence. A wave of cold air rose, reeking of rust, rot, and lavender long decayed. Lucien covered his nose, but Dorian leaned closer. An entrance, lined with curved copper plates, perhaps designed to amplify sound as footsteps echoed downward. Whoever designed this, Dorian whispered, intended the entire passage to act as a sound channel. Once you enter, any sound from below will climb upward, straight into your ears, into your brain. Lucien swallowed. You mean, this place talks to the person going in? Dorian nodded. Not talks, calls. Before descending, Dorian glanced back toward the forest. The leaves were still, but the roots moved ever so slightly, breathing like living flesh. There's more than sound here, he said. This forest is keeping secrets, and I don't think it likes being disturbed. Lucien lit the oil lamp. They stepped down, one stair at a time. Behind them, the hatch closed on its own. The first sound rose from the deep, not clear but undeniably human, a voice, a whisper. Someone or something was waiting. The underground corridor was longer than expected. The air down there was thick, like soot after a fire. The stone walls were coated with gray lichen, and every footstep echoed unnaturally as though sound didn't fade but hovered, trapped in the dark. Lucien raised the oil lamp, its flame flickering. Along the walls, rusted copper wires curled like veins. Dorian's eyes scanned every detail. An old electrical network, likely once used to power the device, or to amplify sound. At the end of the corridor stood a towering metal door, nearly 2 meters high, nearly smothered by roots. Strangely, the roots didn't pierce the metal but wrapped around it, as if trying to hide something behind it. Dorian drew his knife and began clearing the roots, one by one. It took nearly half an hour to reveal the door entirely. In the center was a circular symbol, a mouth open wide, surrounded by characters etched in phonetic script, the kind only acoustic linguists would recognize. Dorian muttered, "This is IPA notation, but not English. Palatal clicks, glottal stops. These aren't words." He touched the lock. Layers of time dust crumbled off, but a faint stain remained. Dried blood still dark around the handle. "Someone came through recently," Lucien said, looking around. "Maybe more than one." The door creaked open without a sound. Inside was a round stone chamber, vaulted like a chapel. The lamp's glow reflected off hundreds of thin, slightly curved mirrors embedded along the walls. Dorian stepped in. Each step echoed like a drumbeat, as if the floor was one giant resonating surface. At the room's center stood a strange machine, nearly man-sized. It looked like an organ stripped of keys, just a circle of brass and silver sound tubes. The control panel was old wood, yet oddly well-preserved, and atop it, a still damp piece of paper. Dorian carefully lifted it. On it was a sound wave log, not a single waveform, but 3 layers stacked. 3? Lucien asked. Dorian nodded. 1 is the base, 18.9 hertz. One is a human voice. The third isn't human. It's the signal coming from the other side of this machine. He turned to a metal panel behind the device. There were notes, names, dates, and a word repeatedly scratched across. Failed at the bottom. Isaac Velt, test 6, status, listening. Lucien whispered, "Velt, he's the one using Rhodes' machine?" Dorian didn't answer. He crouched closer to the device, hand reaching for a small switch. The machine activated, not with sound, but with a slow pulse, like a restrained heartbeat. The chamber's walls began to whisper, "Can you hear it? Come back to me." They all answered already. Dorian shut it off immediately. Their breathing was ragged. The air felt thinner, like something had stolen part of the oxygen from the room. He tapped the copper shell behind the device. The echo it returned wasn't metallic. It screeched like something caged behind the walls. "Lucien," Dorian said quietly, "I'm afraid this machine doesn't just replay memory. It's become a two-way channel." Lucien exhaled sharply. "You mean it's speaking back?" "No," Dorian said slowly. "I think it's learning to imitate, and if we don't stop it, soon it won't need human voices to call us." Dorian leaned over the control panel, fingertips brushing across the hand-carved symbols. The machine emitted a soft tone, barely audible, a subsonic hum that made Lucien's chest feel like it skipped a beat. On the panel was a numbered dial, each mark linked to an audio recording. Beside it, a list of names, all handwritten in fading ink, yet still legible. W. Redford, complete F. Holloway, partial E. Granger, active M. Templeton, failed S. Crowe, recording. Lucien froze. "That's a list of the missing people." Dorian nodded. "One by one, and S. Crowe, same surname as you." Lucien stiffened. "Sarah, she was my aunt. Disappeared 10 years ago in Greyhaven." "Maybe she didn't disappear," Dorian said grimly. "Maybe she was recorded and stored as an emotional frequency layer." He examined the volume controls, but instead of decibel units, each knob was labeled emotion threshold, as if the machine measured the emotional weight of a voice. "This machine doesn't just replay voices," Dorian muttered. "It reconstructs the emotional fabric of them. If someone once whispered, loved, or wept, the device isolates that vibrational data and embeds it into the playback. That's why it sounds real." Lucien swallowed. "So the voices people hear, they're not the real voices? They're engineered replications, merged from biological frequency data and the will of whatever's operating this thing." In a drawer beneath the control panel, they found a small notebook wrapped in rotting animal hide. Inside were handwritten notes by Isaac Velt, the name repeating across pages. Each person is a melody. Match the notes, match the pain, and they'll come. When the harmony is whole, the door will open. On the final page was a diagram. 7 individuals, 7 key frequencies, each linked to a specific location around the forest. Resonance traps. Lucien pointed to a symbol resembling a wide-open mouth encircled in spirals. "Dorian, this isn't magical script." Dorian nodded. "No, it's a Fibonacci spiral in acoustic form, a model used in frequency feedback loops." They looked up at the stone walls. Around them, handprints had been carved into circles like seals, but some of them were cracked, shattered. "Every missing person," Dorian said slowly, "was used to unlock a musical note. Once the melody is complete, the machine won't need triggers anymore. It will start composing its own and call out to whatever it wants." Just then, the machine reactivated without anyone touching it. The dial spun to E. Granger, active. A soft female voice echoed, gentle, childlike. "I'm still here. Daddy, I haven't gone anywhere." Lucien went rigid. That voice. Dorian lunged to shut off the machine, but it was too late. The walls began to vibrate. The mirrors reflected faces that weren't in the room. People who had vanished. Their eyes were dim, but their lips moved, singing. "Get out!" Dorian shouted. They fled as the sound warped. Overlapping speech turned into a twisted chorus, a broken harmony climbing toward a scream. As they burst from the chamber, the door slammed shut behind them. The echo thudded into their chests, like a blow from an invisible hand. Lucien gasped. "How many more do you think it will record?" Dorian stared into the trees, voice cold. "Until it has enough sound to sing for real. And by then, it won't need us at all." 2 days after escaping the stone chamber, Dorian and Lucien rented a small room in Greyhaven's old library, a place isolated enough to preserve recording equipment from outside frequency interference. On the desk, a reel-to-reel tape recorder spun slowly, marked E. Granger, Playback Distortion Analysis. Lucien sat in silence, eyes fixed on the small speaker. The voice played, soft, tender, pleading. "Daddy, I'm still here. I haven't gone anywhere. Don't be afraid." It was the voice of Elric Granger's only daughter, the farmer who lost her to meningitis 3 years prior. He swore he'd heard her every night from the woods, and with each night, he stepped closer. Until one night, he didn't come back. Dorian adjusted the playback frequency. As he isolated each layer, a steady rhythm emerged, not from the voice itself. "It's a repeating waveform," he murmured. "The spacing between words is precise to the millisecond. No human speaks like that." Lucien blinked. "You mean this isn't her real voice?" Dorian nodded. "Number it carries her tone, but there's no breath, no natural pacing. This is a synthetic construct, a simulated voice built from real data." He zoomed in on the waveforms. One segment spiked unnaturally. "Here, listen to this part." "Don't be afraid." Dorian hit repeat. "Afraid, afraid, afraid." The room echoed as the word afraid distorted more with each repetition, until it broke apart into a metallic screech. The tone, no longer human. Lucien backed away, pulse racing. "It's like it's learning to speak." "But it does. It's like it's learning to speak, but it doesn't understand emotion." Dorian nodded. "Or worse, it has none, but it pretends. Like someone learning a language, repeating the words without grasping their meaning." Later that day, they interviewed a new witness, the widow Margaret Holloway, who lived near Oakmere Forest. She claimed to hear her late husband's voice every night. "At first, it was the song he used to sing," she said. "But recently, he started asking questions he never asked before." "Like what?" Dorian asked. She stared out the window. He said, "If I come back, will you let me in?" And I saw myself opening the door, but no one was there. Lucien's spine tingled. "Are you sure it was his voice?" She hesitated. "I think so, but lately, I've started to doubt. He doesn't call me Meggie anymore. He always called me that. Always." That night, Dorian scribbled a single line in his field journal. "An intelligence is learning to wear a human voice, but what it wears is never truly human. And the sweeter the voice, the closer it is to the door." As night fell, Dorian and Lucien left Greyhaven, following the strange symbols in Isaac Velt's notebook. The trail led them to an old wooden cabin, hidden behind a line of ancient pines, absent from any official map, a place locals whispered about as the Forgotten Ground. The cabin was crumbling but not abandoned. There were fresh footprints, half-burnt scraps of paper, and a small altar built from animal bones. On the table, they found dozens of hand-drawn schematics, diagrams of the resonator, sketches of the middle ear's nervous system, notes on the hippocampus and living memory sound. Lying in the center was a dusty file folder labeled W Rhodes, Restricted Material, Clearance Level R. Lucien carefully opened it. The first few pages were classified documents from the Royal Institute of Acoustics, describing an experiment from 1852 in which a low-frequency sound emitter caused 13 people at a research station to suffer insomnia, psychosis, and eventually self-immolation. Project lead, Dr. Walter Rhodes. On the last page, a handwritten note. Even though they silenced him, I still hear it. I will reopen the passage, and this time the voice won't stop halfway. Isaac Velt. Dorian traced a finger along a diagram of the nervous system. Lucien, look here. Everyone affected by the machine showed the same damage. Middle ear trauma and disrupted auditory memory. That's not a coincidence. He pointed at the hippocampus sketch. The device stimulates the hippocampus, the emotional memory center. With low-frequency sound, it doesn't just recall a voice. It forces the brain to recreate the emotional memory tied to that voice. Then it turns the listener into a secondary emitter. Lucien stared in shock. You mean it turns them into speakers? Exactly. If someone listens long enough, they begin to repeat the voice in their mind. And when they respond, even mentally, they become synchronized. In the cabin, they found a hand-drawn map marking 7 locations around the forest, forming a spiral. At its center, the machine's underground chamber. Beside it, a trembling handwritten note, clearly written in haste. Just one voice left. One person who truly believes the voice is real. That person will unlock the 7th tier, the final chorus. After that, no ears will be needed, only belief, and all voices will become one. Dorian froze before an old photo pinned to the wall. It showed a young man with wild hair standing before the prototype of the resonator. Behind him, a wooden sign. We're not calling the dead back. We're teaching sound how to live like one. Behind the photo, a bloody fingerprint trailed toward the cabin's back door. Dorian turned to Lucien, voice as quiet as the forest wind. The machine is almost complete, and when it sings its full song, it won't need us to sing anymore. When they returned to the chamber determined to dismantle the machine, the weather had turned strange. Though it was not yet evening, the sky darkened rapidly. The trees along the path didn't merely bend with the wind. They twisted, as if turning their heads to watch. The air smelled of ozone, like a storm about to strike, and a low vibration began to pulse through their chests, not heard with ears, but felt in the bones. Lucien broke into a cold sweat. Dorian, this forest is alive. Not alive, Dorian replied, his voice tight as a wire. The machine's sound waves have infiltrated the land. The resonance frequency is spreading through soil, stone, and root. Everything has become a secondary membrane. They re-entered the underground chamber. The air inside was so thick, the oil lamp flickered erratically, as if oxygen itself was being drained. The machine was active. No one was touching it. One of the sound tubes emitted a long, distorted moan, layered like a voice sleep-talking through a nightmare. On the control panel, every indicator light was blinking, all voice tracks active simultaneously. Dorian gritted his teeth, drew a dagger, and pulled out a vial of mercury. Mercury, the only thing that can disrupt sound conduction in this alloy. If we destroy the main resonance tubes, the machine will collapse its wave chain. Lucien moved to assist, but the moment Dorian smashed the first tube, the chamber's walls began to crack. The low-frequency pulse became alive, a deep growl like a beast beneath the earth. The ceiling quaked, and copper plates began to burst off the walls like shedding scales. From the gaps, roots shot inward, long, sharp, and deliberate. Lucien screamed, "It knows we're breaking the machine!" Dorian retreated, trying to access the master override. but the controls were moving on their own. The screen displayed, "Signal strong, voices complete, awaiting final subject." Above ground, the forest began to twist. Trees convulsed. Fog slithered across the ground like sentient water. From below, sound surged in waves, like a heart forced to beat beyond its rhythm. Overhead, a flock of crows spiraled above the chamber's mouth, unwilling to leave the center. Dorian shouted over the roar, "We're not just dismantling a machine, we're collapsing an entire resonant system that's rooted into this land." A slab of metal crashed down, cracking the staircase. More roots barreled in, like 100 snakes, fast and coordinated. "We have to fall back. It can't be destroyed this way," Dorian yelled. They escaped just as a shockwave exploded behind them, a sonic blast that rippled across the ground. In seconds, the treetops shuddered in unison, the forest shrieking in a language older than wind. Lucien panted, "If we destroy the machine, the reality around it collapses too." Dorian turned to look at the now sealed mouth of the chamber, a great root-covered wound that looked like no one had ever entered. "The machine isn't just in the forest," he whispered. "The forest has become a part of it." That night, neither Dorian nor Lucien slept. At a table inside Greyhaven's old library, Dorian spread out every diagram of the Resonator Mark I, the spiral resonance model, the catalog of recorded frequencies, and the fragmented notes Isaac Velt had left behind. Their goal was no longer to destroy the machine. It was to collapse it from within, using the very principle of resonance it had been built on. If all the voices are played back simultaneously, but at out-of-phase frequencies, Dorian explained, they'll cancel each other out. It's destructive interference, like breaking a glass by singing the right pitch, but reversed. Lucien nodded. So we don't need to break every part, just force it to sing. Wrong. They returned to the chamber, this time carrying a phase inversion disruptor that Dorian had built, using dual radius speakers, reverse resonance, and variable resistors. He placed the device directly in front of the machine, linking it to the core transmission port. The resonator activated almost instantly, as if it knew they had returned. From its emitters came a strange choir, a daughter's voice, a wife's whisper, a mother's lullaby, even Lucien's own voice. But none of them matched true emotion. They sang, repeating fragments of memory, lullabies, pleas, goodbyes, but cold, mechanical, unnaturally even. Dorian screamed, "Lucien, engage inversion!" Lucien cranked the dial. The disruptor began emitting anti-phase signals, waves that tore through the room like ripping air. The chamber shook. A sharp crack rang out, not a physical shatter, but as if space itself bent under the stress of unnatural harmony. The mirrors on the walls vibrated violently, then shattered one by one. Faces, mid-sentence, were cut off. "My love, don't, I'm still..." Then, silence. A long pause. Then, a scream. Not a human scream. The sound of something forced into silence. A high-pitched shriek, drawn out, then splintering into chaotic sound shards. The speakers exploded. The spiral resonance collapsed. The lights flickered and died. The machine went still. Lucien collapsed to his knees. Dorian grabbed his shoulder, pulling him up as the chamber began to cave in piece by piece. As they scrambled out, rain poured down, like the sky exhaling from unbearable pressure. And for the first time in weeks, the forest was silent. No more whispers, no more lullabies, no more calling. That night, the entire town of Greyhaven slept peacefully, but just before Lucien drifted off, he heard a faint noise behind him. He turned. No one there, just a slip of paper fluttering against the window pane, blown by the wind. On it, written in smudged ink, "When humans fall silent, does the world truly stop speaking?" A week after the incident at Oakmere, Greyhaven slowly returned to what could be called normal. Those who had once heard the voices now recalled them only as dreams, hazy, fading echoes carried away by the wind. The machine had been buried. No one heard the forest sing again. But Lucien was different. He still heard it. Not often. Only in the quietest moments. When he closed his notebook, when he sat by the window, or when he woke in the middle of the night because of an unseen cold that swept across the back of his neck. At first, it was only a light tapping. Then came the lullaby, and one night, while writing down the final notes of the case, he heard his own voice. Lucien, if they can teach a machine how to speak, what's stopping the machine from teaching you how to think? He shot to his feet. The oil lamp quivered, casting his shadow long and distorted, like someone sitting across from him. But there was no one. He opened the window. Only fog and the faded yellow glow of a gas lamp outside. In the far distance, Oakmere Forest was still, as if it had never held anything. But inside Lucien, a question whispered, "Are my memories truly mine? Or are they just recorded sounds played back? The voice I call my own. Is it still me?" Dorian said nothing during their train ride out of Greyhaven. He simply rested his hand on a worn leather journal, its cover stamped faintly. Case number 77, Greyhaven Sound Anomaly. Before closing it, he flipped to the final page and wrote just one line. The machine is silent, but human ears are not. And out there, in forests that still hum when no one listens, there will always be a sound waiting to be remembered in someone's mind at the quietest hour. And if you hear it, don't answer.